They said she was just a retired janitor who liked to wander near the aircraft she once polished. That's what the intern whispered as he shut the hangar doors behind him, barely noticing the older woman standing alone beside the State Route 71 Blackbird, her silver hair pulled tightly beneath a worn leather flight cap, her gloved hands resting gently on the bird's cold black skin. No one remembered her name that morning, not even the new Air Force historian cataloging old tech for the base's digital archive, but someone finally opened the side locker she always stood near. Inside, they found medals no one in the building had ever seen, 2 citations sealed in lamination, and a letter marked Pentagon, eyes only, signed in ink by a Secretary of Defense 3 administrations ago. One line, handwritten, "Let Whitaker fly. She's the only one who can." And just like that, the myth walked back into focus. Before we go deeper, if you agree that honor doesn't fade with age, and that not all heroes wear their story on their sleeve, like and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a tribute. It's a warning about what happens when we stop looking closely. It began like this. The air was brittle that morning over Dryfield Air Operations Testing Site, a mostly forgotten proving ground east of Groom Lake, where old fighters went to die and newer ones came to be tested under tighter budgets. Hangar 17 was supposed to be sealed that week, a quiet closure for insurance reasons, nothing dramatic. But someone had left the west door unlocked. And Lieutenant Colonel Raina Whitaker, retired since '89, unnoticed since '05, had shown up anyway. Not with a badge, not with a crew, just with a thermos of black coffee, a folded schematic, and boots that still carried the weight of altitude pressure from another century. She walked with a slight limp, favoring her left knee, a scar beneath her flight suit from ejecting during a flat spin over Eastern Europe in '78. Not that anyone asked. Most assumed she worked custodial part-time, maybe helping clear bird nests from the rafters. The new ATC recruit, a cocky tech named Keegan, spotted her near the nose cone of the State Route 71 and blinked twice. "Ma'am, you're not supposed to be here," he said through the open mic, his voice half curious, half condescending. She didn't respond, just traced the edge of the pitot tube with one finger like it was a name carved into stone. From the control tower, they watched her like she was a ghost. "I think she thinks she flew that thing," someone joked. "What is she? A museum prop with arthritis?" Raina paused, tilted her head slightly toward the control tower glass, and gave a small salute. Not mocking, not sarcastic, just acknowledgement. Then she reached under the aircraft's chassis, flipped open a panel most of them didn't even know existed, and tapped twice on a rusted transponder unit. The bird blinked back to life. Power cycled. Static hissed across the floor. And suddenly, systems that had remained dead for decades sputtered. Not fully online, just breathing. Like the jet was waking up from a long sleep because the only person it trusted had touched it again. Keegan radioed down to stop her. "Security's en route," he said, his voice cracking slightly now. But she didn't flinch, didn't explain. Just unrolled the yellowed schematic across the mechanic's bench and began writing calculations in grease pencil. Course corrections, lift angles, stress tolerances. The kind of equations they now plug into flight sims, but no one writes from memory anymore. "I thought she was just some hanger-on," someone muttered. "She's not on the records." "Not on theirs, no? But her logbook still sits classified in a vault 40 feet below the Pentagon, filed under official cover, in no civilian eyes." That afternoon, while everyone was prepping a routine avionics test in the new simulator, a systems freeze delayed calibration. Minutes ticked. Techs argued over software versions. Raina, sipping coffee by the cargo lockers, casually asked, "Did you recalibrate the yaw damper to atmospheric drift?" Silence. No one had even thought to. "That's not in the checklist," Keegan said. "It is," she replied. "But the version you use is the edited one." She turned then, slowly, and pulled a small black booklet from her coat. The original flight checklist from 1977. Paper. Handwritten notations in the margins. Dog-eared from altitude. Her initials were all over it. The room went silent. For a moment, no one moved. Keegan reached out, then pulled his hand back like the book might burn. Someone asked where she got it. "They gave it to me when I trained the others," she said simply. "The ones who didn't come back." Later, after sunset, when most of the crew had left and the Blackbird lay silhouetted in the golden afterglow, Someone walked into Hangar 17 and found Raina seated in the cockpit. Not doing anything. Just sitting there, eyes closed, gloved hands on the controls, breathing like she used to when Mach 3 wasn't a simulation. The lights from the tower shimmered against the canopy glass, and in that stillness, one of the younger engineers finally whispered it. She wasn't a janitor. No, she wasn't. She was the one they called when no one else could make the altitude, and the Blackbird remembered. They didn't know what to do with her the next morning. Lieutenant Colonel Raina Whitaker was sitting in the mess hall before sunrise, coffee steaming in front of her, her notebook open to a page dated 1979. She didn't speak unless spoken to, didn't flash credentials, didn't ask for access, but the State Route 71 hangar had been left open again, and nobody had the nerve to close it. The tower buzzed with nervous energy. Keegan, the recruit who'd laughed loudest the day before, now watched from the upper deck in silence. Word had spread, not officially, not through channels, but through whispers, that the old woman in the bomber jacket hadn't just touched a jet. She had built the flight profiles, had flown missions before the simulators even had her clearance level. The tower commander had pulled her file that morning, expecting to find a ghost. What he found was a blank, pages redacted. Service years blacked out, even her separation paperwork marked confidential/archive deep. How's that possible? He'd asked. No one had an answer. By noon, free text from avionics had tried restoring the Blackbird's left side interface node. No luck. A glitch in the backup system kept scrambling telemetry. It's not a glitch, Raina said quietly, watching from the shadows near the tool bench. It's a clock drift. You're syncing the data to the wrong time base. The room froze. She limped forward, set her coffee down, and tapped one line of code on the screen. The monitor stabilized. No fanfare. No applause. She just went back to her seat and opened her notebook again. Keegan followed her out later that day. He found her walking the edge of the airfield perimeter, her hands behind her back, slow, deliberate, like she was measuring the sky. "Ma'am," he began. "I didn't know." She didn't stop walking. Most don't. "But why didn't you tell anyone?" he asked, his voice unsure now. "That you flew it. That you..." She turned then, eyes calm. "Because when they stop listening, talking louder doesn't help. Only patience does." He didn't follow after that. But he watched her from a distance. Everyone did. By the third day, someone had scanned her checklist, the one she carried like scripture, and found 3 protocols still used in training, almost word for word. She hadn't just followed the rules. She'd written them. Yet still, she never stepped onto the platform during debriefs, never inserted herself into planning. She waited. And in that stillness, something else began to move. The Blackbird was scheduled for a ceremonial systems test that Friday, just one engine spin-up, no flight, just optics for the press. But the night before, Base Command was alerted to a classified flyover scheduled to pass within 60 miles of Dryfield's airspace. A blacklisted corridor needed clearing. High-altitude coordination was required. None of the young analysts could decipher the old signal structure being used. Raina, seated in the corner of the monitoring lab, tapped the sheet once. "That's not telemetry," she said softly. "That's a fallback relay, used when satellites go dark." "How do you know that?" the analyst asked. "Because we wrote it. After an EMP strike in '81. She paused. "That fallback is for friendly movement. But if it's misread, the IFF system won't trigger. You'll tag it hostile." The room went still. If she was right, the tower would scramble intercepts on a friendly bird. And if she was wrong, well, she wasn't wrong. She never was. That night, a junior officer hesitantly approached her outside Hangar 17. "Did you really fly over the Kola Peninsula without permission?" Raina looked up from her notes. "They never said, without permission. They said on your own authority." He blinked. "Same thing, isn't it? Not when the secretary signs the launch order himself and denies it later." The officer didn't know what to say to that. He didn't have to. Because at 0400 the next morning, the Blackbird powered on again, only this time, not by remote. Someone had bypassed the tower relay, restarted internal diagnostics, and manually calibrated the inertial guidance unit using Raina's own checklist. The tower panicked. "Who authorized this?" the base commander shouted. No one answered. Then came the voice over internal comms. Calm. Unmistakable. Her voice. "Do not interfere. Confirming calibration. No launch. Just prep. Ma'am, you are not cleared. I am." "By whom?" A long pause. Then a second voice came across the encrypted line. This one didn't belong to anyone on base. By the Department of Defense, it said. Lieutenant Colonel Raina Whitaker's clearance remains active under Directive 8117. B. If you try to override, you will trigger a national security breach. The room froze. Keegan dropped his headset. Someone gasped. Raina, alone in the cockpit, looked up at the stars barely visible above the hangar skylight. Then she spoke once more. Your checklist tells you how to start the jet. Mine tells you how to bring it home. And just like that, every screen in the ops room resynced. Altitude calculations reset. Wind vectors locked in. And the Blackbird purred like it remembered her. Because it did. They gathered without being told to. By the time the sun burned off the fog that morning, half the base stood outside Hangar 17, shoulder to shoulder in uniform silence, staring at the open doors and the unmistakable outline of the Blackbird, its wings stretched like a myth coming back to life. No one had made an announcement. There were no orders given. But when a senior officer from the Pentagon arrived unescorted in a jet black SUV and walked straight past security, everyone knew the story had changed. He didn't carry a clipboard. He carried a single photo, a younger Raina Whitaker in flight gear, helmet tucked under her arm, standing beside the very aircraft now glinting in the pale light behind him. Who authorized this simulation? He asked the tower. Who put her in that cockpit? No one, sir, Keegan answered, standing straighter than he ever had in his life. She didn't ask. She just knew. The officer nodded slowly. That's because she didn't need permission. She's the last living pilot cleared to command this aircraft in hostile blackout conditions. She trained half the names you read in your war college textbooks. And then he looked up, to the woman descending the ladder from the cockpit. She wasn't in uniform. Just in the same leather jacket she always wore, boots laced with the kind of precision you can't fake. Her face was steady, her eyes calm. The hangar floor held its breath as he saluted her first. Sharp. Precise. The kind of salute that tells everyone watching, this person earned something you can't give, only recognize. Raina didn't return it immediately. She looked around first. At the mechanics who dismissed her. At the tower crew who joked about her. At the young recruits who now stood in full stillness, not because they were told to, but because they knew. Then, slowly, she returned the salute. The officer stepped forward and placed something in her hand. A medal, its ribbon slightly worn, its case long faded. We meant to give this to you in '89, he said. But the mission was sealed. And so were you. She stared at it for a moment, then tucked it inside her coat. I didn't fly for medals, she said softly. I flew because someone had to bring them home. And with those words, something shifted in the air, not dramatic, not loud, just honest. The base commander approached next, his voice tight, awkward. Colonel Whitaker. I owe you an apology. She gave a small nod. No. You owe the checklist an apology. I just happened to write it. Behind them, the SR-71's engines began cooling in the morning sun, the heat shimmering off its surface like steam rising from memory. Someone asked if she would stay, maybe give a lecture, maybe finally tell her story in full. She shook her head. Stories only matter if someone listens the first time. That afternoon, Hangar 17 was reclassified. The ceremony wasn't public. But a small bronze plaque appeared beside the cockpit ladder. Lieutenant Colonel Raina Whitaker, eyes only. Mind always. In the base archives, her file was quietly unsealed and moved to legacy clearance, a category reserved for names whose silence shaped more operations than most can count. And 3 weeks later, during a civilian aviation expo, when the topic of the Blackbird came up, a young Air Force recruit raised her hand and said, "Wasn't she flown by a janitor once?" The room laughed. But a colonel in the back stood and corrected her. No, it was protected by a pilot the rest of us will spend our lives trying to live up to. The recruit didn't laugh after that. Raina Whitaker never returned to the base. She left behind only her coffee thermos, a grease pencil, and the original flight checklist, laminated now, under glass, hanging next to the engine housing. But on foggy mornings, when the runway lights flicker before sunrise and the wind moves just right, some say the bird still hums a little louder, like it's listening for her boots. And if you walk past Hangar 17 and salute the silhouette out of respect, well, no one questions it anymore. Because some pilots break sound, others break silence. And some, like Raina, remind you that the highest flight doesn't start on a runway. It starts when someone refuses to be forgotten,